Good morning, children of God. Are you used to seeing people with masks by now? I am. I usually wear one whenever I'm in a building that's not my house, but I did take it off so that it would be easier to talk to you today. Hope you're still enjoying summer. It's really been hot outside. I hope you've been able to get in the water and play around, or maybe just stay inside where it's cool. I've been getting up earlier and earlier to take my walks. And this morning I saw a deer. I wonder what you've been doing that's special. I'm gonna go ahead and light our candle to get started with worship. And you all know by now why we light this candle. It's to call us together and to recognize that even though Jesus is with us all the time, He's with us in a very special way during worship. I'm having a hard time. This box is getting really old, I think. Finally. It's a really special thing to know that we're in the presence of God. I wore another special dress today. I'm starting to feel a little bit like Mrs. Frizzle or Miss Frizzle from the Magic School Bus. Do you ever watch that? And notice how she always wears a dress that has something to do with the lesson that she's teaching? This is not quite about the lesson I'm teaching. This is a dress that has the Apollo rockets and the Saturn V rocket and the Apollo moon landing, lunar landing thing, the Apollo command module. And I wore it to celebrate the fact that if you're watching this on Sunday, tomorrow is the 51st anniversary of the time that America landed astronauts on the moon. Do you know their names? I bet you do. One was named Neil Armstrong. He was the first one to get out and actually walk on the moon. And another was named Buzz Aldrin. And Buzz was the first person to take communion on the moon. Before he left for the moon, he had his pastor give him some juice and some bread, and he had the pastor bless it like Pastor Fred does for us during communion. And then he took it with him to the moon. And in between the time that the lunar lander came to the surface of the moon and the time that he got out and walked around and had his picture taken on the moon and all that, he had a communion service to recognize that Jesus is with us everywhere, even on the moon. And if you ever go to Houston, Texas, you can go to the church that he went to, and you can see in a little display case the little chalice that he used when he took communion on the moon. It seems like it's been a long time since we've had communion together, and I can't wait to do it again. I don't know when it will be. No one knows when it will be, but I hope it will be soon. Here we are with our church calendar. Do you know what season we're in? I bet you do. Is it Easter? Is it Pentecost? Or is it ordinary time? It is ordinary time, you're right. And we're about here in ordinary time. If we look at all the different Sundays that are here in ordinary time, we're kind of right about here. When we get to here, it'll be Thanksgiving. It'll be a lot cooler outside. Our story today actually has a little bit to do with the moon too. We're going to talk about the time that Paul went to Athens and talked to people who worshiped the sun and the moon as if they were gods. Paul wasn't having any of that. Paul was going to tell them about the one true God. What do you think happened when he did? Let's see. Our story today continues the story of Paul. Remember that Saul, as he was called at first, had been persecuting Christians and hurting Christians and trying to stop people from talking about Jesus still being alive. But that when he was traveling to Damascus, he had had an experience on the road where Jesus came and talked to him, and that eventually Saul, or Paul, as he preferred to be called after he became a Christian, was baptized and then began to teach people all over the world about the kingdom of God and the message of Jesus. And he traveled a lot of different places in the Roman world. Paul spoke Greek and Latin. He also spoke the language of the Jews. He was a very educated man. He just went everywhere and he told them about God. And he had a lot of different adventures everywhere he went. Sometimes people were happy to hear what he had to say. Sometimes they were not so happy. He was thrown in jail a couple of times. He was beaten up. He was shipwrecked. He just rolled with the punches and got right back up and began telling people more and more stories about Jesus and about God and the kingdom of God and how to become a Christian. In our story today, he came to the town of Athens in Greece. Now, Athens in Greece had been for about 500 years the place where everyone went to get the very best education. The people in Athens were very learned and they were always interested in new ideas. But they didn't send rockets to the moon. Instead, they worshipped the moon and the sun and all the things God had created, and they thought that they were gods. And so they had statues everywhere to represent all the different gods and goddesses. They were so concerned, these Athenians, about worshiping everyone and making sure that every god and goddess had his due, that they had an altar that was made out to the unknown God. Just in case we're leaving one out, we're going to have an altar so we can make sacrifices there too. Paul was not too impressed with this, all these smart, wise people worshiping all these different gods. And so when he came to the place where the Jewish people hung out in Athens, he began to talk to them like he always did, and talk to them about Jesus and how Jesus had been the fulfillment of everything their ancestors had learned from the prophets, Abraham, Isaac, Joseph, Moses, and how God had finally sent Jesus and Jesus was still alive and the kingdom of God was near and they should believe in Jesus. Well, the leaders of the town in Athens heard about Paul's teachings and preachings, and they talked among themselves, and they said, what is this guy saying as he talks to all these people and he tells them stories and gets these crowds of people? What exactly is he teaching? What has he got to learn? What has he got for us that we might learn? Because the Bible even tells us that the Athenians did nothing all day long but learn new things and talk about new ideas. And maybe they wanted to hear what Paul had to say too. So they sent for him to come to the center of town, a place called the Areopagus. And Paul went and talked to them and told them that the gods that they worshipped were evidence that they were really people who sought the truth and who wanted to learn about God. He said, I even noticed that you had an altar to the unknown God. Let me tell you about the one you didn't know about, the one true God. And so Paul told them about the God that had sent his son and who wanted everyone to believe in him. The Jewish people, the people of Athens were not too sure about this. Nobody really wants to hear that they're not quite right, or maybe even that they're wrong, or that they have, that Paul's ideas might be more true than their ideas. And so they said, we need some time to think about this. And others said, we should send him out of town. But a few people believed, and a few people became followers of the one true God because of what Paul had said. Now this is what happened everywhere that Paul went. Most of the time, most of the people did not believe that everything he had to say. A few believed a little bit of what he said, and a few became Christians and started a Christian church. And then Paul would move on to a new place and teach. And Paul spent all the rest of his life going to the different places throughout the Roman world, starting new churches and telling people the good news that Jesus was alive. He had a lot of different adventures, but of course those are stories for another day. You know, every time I read or tell one of the stories about Paul or Peter or the early Christians, I'm just always so impressed by their courage and their conviction, and the fact that following Jesus wasn't always easy for them, and it didn't always make their lives more comfortable. In many cases, it made their lives more uncomfortable. And yet they were so concerned about spreading the love of Jesus to everyone that didn't matter. That wasn't what was important to them. Let's think about ways this week that we can spread the love of Jesus. One of the things I think I'm going to do this week is write a few notes to people that I haven't seen, maybe people that are isolated and don't have a lot of company now under these conditions. Another thing that I'd like to ask is that during the month of August, not next week, but the week afterward, I need some of you kids to help me with some reading, some Bible reading. If you can read well enough to read 2 or 3 verses in the Bible, and you'd like to be in one of the videos, which you can film from your home, would you have your parents get in touch with me, or your grown-ups get in touch with me? I'd love to see you featured in one of the videos for August. Meanwhile, it's time for us to say goodbye for the week. So I'm going to go ahead and blow this one out, and we'll see you again soon.